Over the last 5 years, I've spent a lot of time with wealthy people. Whether I met them at work, school, or at events, I realized that it was these 7 things that set them apart from the rest. There was actually a study on this by the University of Pennsylvania. It talks about how the wealthy people spend and invest their money very differently than people who aren't as successful. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of the information that was in that article. And if you agree or disagree with some of these tips, please let me know down in the comments below. So let's get right into these points. The first difference is that the rich are subtle about their wealth. So stealth wealth is a real thing, and what I've noticed personally is that the true wealthy are not trying to impress you with a fancy car or designer clothing, or even just posting on social media their vacation. Because the wealthy know that the true flex is actually having the autonomy to do whatever you want. And so it can make it very hard to figure out who's pretending and who's not. Let's take, for example, somebody in the fitness industry, somebody who has abs. If they're telling you about their ab routine, you can physically see that they have abs, versus with wealth, if you can't see somebody's bank account, you don't actually know how much money they're making. Chances are you'll probably listen to the person that has abs because they can show you that they actually got results, because you can visibly see it. You can't visibly see somebody's bank account unless they show you, and even then we have no idea if that's actually their bank account. The people who are truly wealthy want to keep their life very separate from social media and any sort of unwanted attention, because there is very few benefits to showing how much money you actually have. I went to a car meet just about a month ago, and I was interviewing people with Ferraris, Lamborghinis, McLarens, and there was this one person specifically that didn't even want to be on camera. He had a car collection of over $300,000, and yet he didn't even want to be on camera. He didn't have a social media presence either. His life was extremely private, and yet he had the money to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. I used to do commercials and modeling, and one thing that I struggled with that I think most people do is spending that money on designer clothing, trying to keep up with the latest and greatest designer stuff that comes out, only to realize that a few months later, you're completely bored of it. It's not as fun to wear it anymore because something new has come out. And even if I didn't get bored of it, it's still like sitting in my closet most of the week. In fact, most of the month. I realized that most of us spend that kind of money for the status, so that way we don't get perceived as poor, so that way you feel like after working hard that you've earned it. But the problem with this is that it's a very short-handed approach to building wealth. And that brings us into our next point, which is number 2. Rich people know it takes money to make money, so they often save and invest instead of spending it right away. To be honest with you, the rich stay rich by living like they're poor, while the poor, they stay poor because they're living like they're rich. The rich understand that it takes money to make money, and so they save and invest rather than spending it as soon as they get it. Rich people understand that to leverage their capital, it'll make them more money in the long term. Now, let me explain. Let's say you invest $100 into an ETF, and you get a 10% return. Well, that 10% of your $100 will be $10. Now let's take that same 10%, but let's apply it to $100,000. Your $100,000 investment with a 10% return will be $10,000. And so while yes, you are risking a lot more capital, your return will be much greater. And so the rich really understand that if they can get that sort of nest egg up into the 10,000 or above range, they will be able to get a higher return on their investments. This is why rich people emphasize saving and investing, so that way they can get their investments over the 4, 5, 6 figure range as soon as possible, instead of spending all of their money early on. Because once that compounding starts to happen, you'll have to worry about money less and less as you get older. Most Americans today don't even have $1,000 in emergency fund. And so if a $5,000 emergency happened and you only have maybe $10,000, that would set you back about 50% of what you're worth. Now, let's pretend your net worth is $500,000 and you have a $5,000 emergency. Now, your net worth would only be set back by 1% instead of the 50%. Now this brings us to our next point, and it's that the rich understand delayed gratification. Let's say you wanted to buy a new, flashier car for $20,000. You want to enjoy that feeling of driving a car that's flashier, maybe even faster. But that car over time is going to depreciate, it's going to lose its value. Now, someone who is rich, they would spend that same $20,000, but instead they would invest it into an ETF such as the S&P 500, which has an annual rate of return of 8 to 10%. In 10 years, that $20,000 could grow to $80,000 to even $140,000. You sacrifice short-term luxury for long-term financial freedom, and that's how the rich keep getting richer. Instead of owning a depreciating asset, you invest into a appreciating asset which will pay you in the long run. Now this brings me to my fourth point, and it's that the rich overwhelmingly love assets, while the poor would rather save their money than invest, because they don't necessarily understand or trust the financial system. The definition of an asset is that it's a resource with economic value that will provide a benefit to you at a later point in time. So ideally, when you invest in an asset, it goes up in value, and perhaps it can even pay you for owning said asset. So here's a great graphic for that actually. So this graphic actually kind of shows you how wealth is made up at different net worth tiers. You can see at the top and bottom rows, there are all types of assets that people own as you get into the higher net worth tiers. Business interests, real estate, stocks, mutual funds, and it all becomes bigger and bigger as the breakdown of wealth increases. So a business interest would include something like owning a piece of private company or partnership or corporation. Now at the lower net worth tiers, you'll see around 10K to 100K. The value of primary residence is the biggest, followed by vehicles, which I thought was actually pretty surprising. While cars are assets, a lot of them are depreciating assets. So just make sure to keep in mind that when you are investing in assets, you're trying to aim to get an actual rate of return. Now this graph isn't end all be all. There's obviously exceptions to this. Couldn't possibly capture every single person and their individual investments. Now number 5, rich people know that money management is crucial. Now that doesn't mean that they track their expenses and everything down to the last cent, but they have a general idea of where their money's going. And rich people generally aren't overspending because let's be honest, social media gives this sort of impression that we must spend more money in order to feel happier. We need to take more vacations, spend more money on designer clothing, maybe buy a nice brand new car. Whatever the case may be, social media has sort of twisted the dial, telling us that we must do these things in order to feel more happy and fulfilled. But the truly rich know that they have to ignore the noise and spend their money on things that will actually help them in the long term. Now, the last thing that the rich do is they have excellent credit and they know how to leverage their credit without overextending themselves by getting into debt. Now, if you live in the United States, you need to be making your payments on time. And let's say, for example, you have made 96 out of 100 of your payments. Now, based off the credit bureau, you would think that that was actually pretty good, but that would actually be bad because anything below 97% is actually considered poor. I can't stress the importance of getting your payments on time because you actually need to be above 99% to be very good and above 100% if you want to be excellent. So set up calendar alerts, find somebody to hold you accountable, do whatever it takes so that way you can get your credit score up. One of the biggest reasons why you'd want to keep a good credit score, let's say you want to buy a $500,000 house in Texas. With a good credit score, you might qualify for a 30-year mortgage at a 6.5% interest rate. Now, if you had an average credit score, your interest rate might be a little bit higher at 7%. Now that's just 0.5% difference, but that 5% difference in your mortgage rate could actually amount to over $39,000 in saved interest over the course of your mortgage. And all this benefit just comes with having a higher credit score. Now that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a comment letting me know what you thought of today's video. And I'll see you in the next one.